Hey everybody, good morning, Robb. We've got a treat today. This is another in our series of videos on alternative architecture, simple methods of building homes. And this is by Lloyd Kahn, who is a really big guy when it comes to alternative architecture. He's been making books on simple, small homes since 1973. This is his fifth book, and I think it's probably his best one. This is not a how to do it. This is more an inspirational book. Actually, it's more of a celebration. This is a celebration of hundreds of people all around the world that have made very small homes, primarily out of recycled material or from using stuff that was on the work site, the property, the trees, the sand, the soil, the clay, the rocks, or building them in interesting locations on the sides of mountains, rivers, and beaches, and so on. It's like I said, it's a celebration of building very small, unique homes, often in an environmental way, inexpensive way, and always a very unique way. Some of these aren't architecture; they're art. Some of these are they're sculptures. They're incredible. Let's go and look at his quick table of contents. He's divided this up into homes that are more or less traditional, they're on foundation, homes that are mobile, they're on wheels, more sophisticated homes built by architects, kits and prefabs that are available for people that have used them as a starting point to build something else. One of my favorite sections of using earth materials like cob and adobe and different things, pallets and straw bales and all sorts of different things. The tree houses were pretty amazing. Then mobile living quarters, and then aquatic on the water. And over the years, I've lived on the water. I had a small 33-foot wooden Chris-Craft cabin cruiser with no engine that was worth $900 in the late 70s on the Miami River. I've lived in a small converted car garage in North Dade in North Miami. And where else? I lived on the small, tiny, like 6 feet by 10 or 12 foot cabins on merchant vessels. So I've lived in small houses before. And he starts off, this very first one is a person who built a little house out on a mountain. And this was a very inexpensive house. And it sort of starts the precedent of people who are building unique one-off type of structures that are really beautiful using the material that's available on the property, and taking advantage of the landscape and the positioning of the house and so on, and just blending it into the environment. And it's a really wonderful structure, very small, built for a very small amount of money. Of course, a lot of these, they may not have used a lot of money, but they took a lot of time. Oftentimes, these houses were built with groups of people, but always in the end, they ended up with something that was just magnificent. I want to say also, nowadays people are wondering what is the future of books, because you can get everything online. You can do a web search for tiny homes and houses and get 5,000 photographs on a Google search. And, but there's still stuff that's not indexed on the internet, and there's still no way for the internet and digital to give you the tactile feel of opening a book and looking at pages like this. And it's just it's a feast for the eyes. This is a small shack built with the wood that was milled on the property. It took them 4 months and $1,500, and it's a substantial looking building. This is a cottage that was built in somebody's backyard. It's 120 or under 120 square feet to stay under the city code requirements, which is a big problem in the U.S. There's many places around the world that are building fantastic small structures, but they're not burdened by a code that requires them to do different things. Where here in the U.S. you can still get by the code using loopholes of size and so on. And this is a pretty interesting building that was built basically with found stuff in the urban area. If you live in the forest and so on, you can use many things from the forest, but if you live in the urban areas, you have to be crafty and find things you can recycle and convert. He's got the stuff growing on the roof to keep the heat down and so on. It's interesting. This was a desert home that was built using the steel panels and the fiberboard and so on. Really inexpensive and fairly quick building. And he's got the roof over the main building to keep the heat down. And it's a very interesting building. $2,000 solar cabin. Once again, very small footprint. Of course, it's called tiny homes, so I'm sure they're all going to be small. But this is a very nice one. I like this one. This was a converted chicken coop. Some of these, more than a few of these tiny home builders were people who had earlier lived on small boats, which are the prototype small home. What a nice environment. House for one person. This material was basically processed on site using the trees, the cedar, and so on. Post and beam with scribed wall infill. And more than a few of these people did not have any building experience before they started. These are all buildings that have a foundation. They're more or less typical. This is a beautiful house here. This $1,000 cabin on the coast. Very nice structure. It's interesting to spend some time looking at the interior photographs, showing how they were able to actually live inside the buildings. It's one thing to have an interesting facade exterior of the building, but since you're going to be living inside, you want to see what they did to make themselves to live comfortably inside really small spaces. And I find the interior photographs to be just as fascinating, if not more, than the exterior. Wow, that's amazing. Right on the ocean with the pool there. And these are in British Columbia. Board and batten structure with the metal roof. Also, more than a few of these buildings were built in cooperation with other people who were in the same area building their houses. And so they would learn from each other and cooperate, like a community effort, which is even an extra added benefit. The carpentry on some of these are extraordinary. This fellow, Brad Cattell, he has for a long time been salvaging and reusing different houses to build things, and he gets his building material very inexpensively that way, and is able to build all sorts of interesting traditional style buildings. He's in Texas. These are the work he's been doing, focusing on small architecture, small houses. Really wonderful. This is a cabin that's on a trailer bed, or it was on a trailer bed. So now, these are some of the mobile buildings. That they're not RVs, but they're tiny houses on wheels. One of the advantages of doing that is you can go to a site and have your house, plunk down immediately. Also, if there's any issues, you can take up your house and move, or also you can move with the weather or whatever. Also, a lot of places, the building code allows for a structure to be on a trailer, and if you had a foundation, it would cause a big problem because it'd be against the code. But if it's still on a trailer, then it's not that big of a deal for the building code. So it's another way to get by. And I could see where you could have a friend or a relative that has some property. You could just put this on their property, and it wouldn't cause a big problem with the neighbor so much as you were actually building a real house. Then you might run into some issues. These are some inexpensive houses built by this young woman, Janine Alexander. I kind of like the metal one. And a lot of these people, once again, they just learned as they went along. They didn't have a lot of experience. Or, like I said, they were involved in the community. That's a very nice interior. These are some good interior shots. Very good interior. You get an idea of what's going on inside. So these are the houses that were on wheels. Now I think these are the ones built by or designed by architects. Look at the windows here. Wow. How big is this? This looks so much bigger. This is a beautiful structure. What a beautiful building. I love the veranda that goes around the exterior and the 2-story. Also, I've always been interested in houses that as they grew onto the larger story, they expanded, as opposed to like as they get taller, they get smaller. That's very interesting architecture design. Prefab cottages. The shack at the farm. There's a house by the water. This is the small house in Tokyo called the Capsule Hotel. These have been around for a while, where people who were traveling and are living in Tokyo didn't have a lot of money to spend on housing. So they would just work in the city during the week and go home on the weekend or whatever, and they would just live in these little capsules. This is about as small as it gets, 6.5 feet by 5 feet. You can't stand up. So that's as small as it's going to get, I think. The Thailand orphanage, the butterfly houses, they're kind of cool. Here's some more use of the corrugated or the metal. That's interesting. These are houses that are prefab. Very nice designs. Yard pods. These were designed for, like, you have a relative, your grandmother or someone, an elderly person, they put in the backyard for people, or people who want office space and so on. Mobile cabins. That's pretty interesting. Tom's cabin. He built this from a tough shed, which is like a shed you can get like at the Home Depot and so on. And then he wanted something small so it would be within the code and he wouldn't have a permit problem. But he has an outdoor outhouse, like for the bathroom outside. So he doesn't have a bathroom inside. And he has a loft on the top where he sleeps. So he opens up all the space. So even though it was just $4,000, he was able to turn into something that was very comfortable and cozy for him. Here we've got more prefab houses and kits with the addresses and the locations and contacts. Now we're starting to get into the really, really off-the-wall stuff here that are just out of this world. This is another one that was built in the woods using the forest products. Straw bale. I'm not a big fan of straw bale, but there's a lot of straw bale in here. People used. And this is one of the only houses where they kind of showed the methods of the building being constructed. Adobe. A huge amount of people around the world live in earth houses. And I'm surprised that they don't have more here in this country, because of it's really inexpensive sometimes because of the raw material. Now we're getting into something that's really wild. This gentleman, when he started, he was not a experienced woodworker, carpenter, builder at all, and he needed something to live in while he was doing work in his property. And this is all stuff from he got on this property. He used plastic and sheet and mud and turf further on the roof, and you've got straw bale in the walls. These roof rafters, they're reciprocal, and just this found wood that's curved like that. And look at the curves he got from the found wood, and it's really fascinating. All of this is reclaimed, recycled stuff was found. He's got the skylight in the top to bring in light. It's just a fascinating. This is a cob house, which is a really ancient method of using earth and straw and mud and so on. And it's very handy in some parts of the world. You can even use it in places where there's rain, so long as you have like a strong overhang to keep the rain from getting down at the bottom. But I'm not a big fan of the earth like walls. It just doesn't seem. I like. I'm not used to that, but I do like the rest of the house. It's interesting. This was a very inexpensive house to build, and I think it took them about 4 months. And it's basically another earth house, and it's a wonderful cottage. It's beautiful design. The interior is fantastic. Look at this. This is what I'm talking about. I wouldn't mind living here, but this one I'm not so sure. This is beautiful. Don't get me wrong, but just the wall, it's just earth. It just seems dirty to me. Where this one, it just seems clean. And it's basically the same building material. But yeah, the stuff that they did here, it's just a fantastic house. Really is. This is a group of women in British Columbia that are involved in building different houses out of the cob material. And this is one of the least expensive houses in the whole book. And it was built with a cob and pallets, wooden pallets, and but basically like $500 for everything. This book I think was 2013, so I'm sure prices have gone up in the last 15 years. But another straw bale house, another cob house. This is a cordwood house. These were very popular back in the 70s. If you were a fan of the Mother Earth News magazine, you will be familiar with them. But they have a lot of interesting positive benefits from building with them. This is a gentleman that was building a earth house in Africa and Mali. The yurt. This is a beautiful yurt. Gentleman wanted something. He didn't have a lot of money, a lot of experience, but he had the property, and so he built a yurt, and he's been living in it for a long time. And here's a sauna. Look at that woodwork. Look at that woodwork. Holy cow! Built by Colin Dawn. What a nice shack. The surfer shack. Everything here is from the palm fronds and the midribs. Even the stuff on the floor is the palm and the roof. And you've got the ocean and the sand and the sun and your dogs. It's like, oh man, what else do you need? This is probably the most interesting and beautiful yurt in the whole book, I think. It's a very big one, really big, and interesting skylight and so on. The Pentagon cabin. Now, my goodness, this is the one that really blew me away. Ard High, the Toad Cabin. I'm not so sure how comfortable it would be to live inside this building, but this is not really a building. This is a sculpture. This is art. Look at this. There's a big giant boulder here, and the house is up and nestled against the boulder, and the land comes down, it slopes down. Then you've got up on the pier, the wooden piers, you've got this part, then you've got this bigger part that's in the bottom part, then it's at an angle, and the roof is at an angle, then you've got this big log that's in the wall, and you've got the window that's not perpendicular to it's not horizontal, it's at an angle. And then you've got this circle here with this design in it. And you've got the roof that's coming down like somebody's cap on the farmer's head, that the wind's been blowing. It's just like a freaking amazing building. It's like, it's not architecture. This is sculpture. This is freaking sculpture. It's just amazing. And the inside looks a little bit, helter-skelter, but, I don't know. I think you get used to it. But wow, that's just, I'm looking at that. Every time I look at it, it's like, holy cow. And it gets better. It gets better. Well, in a way, look, what is this building here? Well, you know what this is. This is their outhouse. My gosh. Look at that. Imagine in your head what an outhouse looks like. Then try to think of the most crazy looking, fantastical outhouse you could come up with. And you still wouldn't come up with that. That's just insane. And I mean, in a good way. This is a one-room bedroom. And then that's the solar shower. It's just, everything in here is just like off the wall. It makes you, even if you don't want to build a small house, you're not interested in architecture, this makes you want to be more creative in your life. This is, like I said, this book is a celebration, and this is one of the reasons that we are celebrating. This is an amazing bunch of designs. Wow. Whew. Solar potting shed. Looks so comfortable. It looks so comfortable. This is another comfortable driftwood shack. I don't know if you can see here. It's nestled in the side of a hill. I think on the west coast, California, someplace maybe, or Washington, Oregon, and it's just driftwood that they collected and built a little shack on the wood. Of course, it was against the rules. Eventually, they tore it down. It got torn down. But can you imagine living there, right on the shore, on the beach, away from everybody, and you wake up and to see the ocean? It's like, and everything is just stuff you found on the beach. It's like Robinson Crusoe, but like you can smell the surf, you can smell the ocean and the air, and it's just like you would pay a lot of money to spend just one night and day in something like that. That's just an experience. You'd feel so connected to the air and the sky and the sea and the sun. It's just like, what an amazing little shack, huh? A little beach shack. Here's a bridge that was included with the designs. This fella got permission to build a bridge by the Park Service. He said he wouldn't charge them anything, but they had to let him design whatever design he wanted. So this is the design he came up with, which is pretty cool, actually. Now we're getting into the tree houses. And who hasn't ever wanted to live in a tree house? It's like every kid's dream. Pretty cool. Pretty cool. Look at that. Look at that. This is a painting. This is a freaking painting. You know what I'm saying? This is a painting. This isn't a house. This is a painting. Yeah. My goodness. Look at that roof. Boom, 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 boom. Light, shoo, light, shoo, light, shoo, light, shoo. Wooden floor, wooden walls, breathing in and out. You can smell the wood. Yeah, holy cow. Look at all those windows and the light coming up on the desk. You're up in the air and you're in a freaking tree. You're in a freaking tree. You're at this desk and you're doing whatever you gotta do and you're looking out the windows. You're in a freaking tree. Life is good. Look at that. He's got his feet hanging down and look down at the ground. Yeah. This is a beautiful one too. Out in the jungle. You can see off in the distance the ocean. Here's the one by the lake. Whew. Diedrichens, he's got some good stuff. I've seen his stuff. I think he's got a YouTube channel. You want to check him out. This is a kind of a callback, a shout out to the 60s. This was a little commune of people building alternative architecture. A bunch of hippies out in the woods building stuff and just being hippies until they kicked them out after a couple of years, But this is sort of like a connection from the 21st century. This is the 1960s. Yeah. This is Lloyd's van. He's lived in different things he built over the years. He's lived on sailboats and so on. He took I think it was a Dodge, or no, a Ford Econoline, 1990, and he cut off a bunch of it. He took some 2x4s, built a frame, and then this is what he ended up with on the inside. This is Mylar, and he's got the wood and so on. And said, "What's it like to live in a 75 square foot home? I must live life in an orderly fashion." He said he buys toilet roll paper one roll at a time for the space. But he just drives us around, stays at different places, and it's interesting to see what he came up with after being exposed to so much other architecture. Now we're getting into some more smaller type things on wheels, which you can learn a lot from. What a beautiful RV. But these interior shots, though, are really helpful to get an idea of how people are. Look at that workspace. Wow. That's pretty cool. Pretty cool. Can you see that there? Wow. Sheep wagon. You can't get much smaller than a sheep wagon. This gives you tips on how to really do it small. Here's another small wagon. Another wagon. Very small wagon. Now we got just smaller stories here. Like, here's a little scooter that somebody built, a Honda Spree scooter to do day trips. This was a Honda Civic that was totaled, and the guy cut off the back part, and he built this out of very thin poplar wood and fiberglass. And he's taken it cross country a few times, I think. The cool thing about the Civic is it's got extremely high gas mileage. Really thrifty car. And yeah, pretty interesting. This is more of a traditional van, but even so, this is a pretty interesting interior. And this is not a typical interior at all. This lady is an artist, and her surroundings reflect who and what she is. She's 72. There's a fella that built a tiny little wagon, and he's traveled like across country like 2,000 miles with his mule. And but he says he built his wagon really small, but he ends up getting invited to people's houses a lot and in their kitchen table, so he doesn't live in it nearly as much as you would think. The Horsebox House. Wow. Then there's a collection of what they're calling American nomad rigs, but these are really just really fascinating type RVs from another time period. Speaking of which, we're going to say something cool in a second. Yeah, these are pretty cool. These are do-it-yourself RV type things that he's collected information about over the years. Really fascinating, eclectic group of mobile architecture. I thought this was pretty cool. You kind of think that, we're different from our ancestors, our grandfathers and great-grandfathers. We're kind of cooler, and we got all this stuff going on that they didn't have. Well, back then, they did a lot with what they had, and some of what they do was pretty cool. Like, look at this, 1920. This is a 1920 Ford Model TT motorhome with sunroom and back porch. Can you believe it? That was from 1915. In 1946. There's a 1920. The Hunt House car, 1937. Back to the Future. Some pretty wild stuff. Then he talks about, in the last chapter, the aquatic small homes. I've often thought that there's a lot of sailboats and motorboats that are no longer seaworthy, and they would be excellent choices for people to purchase and then transport to their property, and then not have to build a house, but just use the old motor vessel or sailing vessel as a small home, because it already has usually wiring for the lighting, the plumbing, the cooking, and so on. You've got so many things already built. You don't have to spend hardly any money, and also it's not violating a lot of codes because it's not a house. It's just it's a boat that you're building or working on. So you don't have as many problems with the code inspectors. So there's so many boats out there you can get for nothing on Craigslist. So yeah, the last few parts of the book are just going over people living in small houses that were boats, and which are pretty interesting. But they're the prototype small house because they're really self-sufficient. They have to have everything to live for months at a time away from the whole world and be on their own and have storage space and water and electricity and ways to cook and be safe and be warm and be cool. And it's just the original prototype. These are floating homes, which the problem with houseboats is once you live on them, you're spoiled for life because you really don't want to live on a house anymore, because when you're on a houseboat, you're just connected to the water, to the sky and the rain and the cycles, and it's just a whole different way of life. You get spoiled. Ontario Boathouse. I've seen some people, they have a property on the river, and what they do is they get a houseboat and they put it on their bank of the river, and then they don't build a house on their property. That way they don't have to pay a lot of money on taxes, but they use their property to park their car and grow their garden and fruit trees and stuff, or maybe a little tiny workshop that's under the zone requirements. And then they just live a nice life on the water, and they didn't have to pay a lot of money for it. I know somebody actually in the city of Miami that's doing that. Hard to believe. Cabin up in the lake. What a beautiful, fantastic lifestyle. Back to nature. Narrowboats. I watch all those videos on YouTube about narrowboats in England and so on, and they're fascinating. Here in South Florida, we have history that goes back, European history, basically, 1880s or something, city of Miami, Lemon City, and so on, where they've got like little houses in England that go back like, a few thousand years. There's so much history and so on in Europe that they don't have here. And you just go in your little canal boats going down, traveling through everything. Pretty cool. Pretty cool. So guys, like I said before, it's Tiny Home, Simple Shelter. It's a celebration. It's what it is. It's not a book. It's a celebration. You don't have to buy this book. I'll leave a link for it in Amazon if you do want to buy it. It helps me out. In fact, if you use that link to buy anything on Amazon, it helps me out. But you can get this from your library. I did. And it's not so much how to do it, but why to do it. Because you want to maybe have a little different way of life going on in your life. You know? It's a lot of inspiration, a lot of makes you feel good. This book makes me feel good. All right, I'm yapping too much. It's time to go. They're coming to get me. All right, take care. See you out there.